Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you spending some of your evening with us tonight. This is the Solar 101 for the 2024 Phoenix Metro Solar Co-op. Couple housekeeping notes. This is a webinar mode, so we cannot see you, but we know that you're here and we want to answer your questions. So please, if you have questions throughout the presentation tonight, feel free to put those into the chat, and we will get to those questions. If there's something simple, easy to answer, my colleague Trinity will probably answer them as we're going. Otherwise, I'll take a brief pause in between each section to answer any questions out loud that we might need to. Also, this webinar is being recorded, and we will send a copy of that recording out to everybody who RSVP'd after this. It's also going to be posted on YouTube if you've got a neighbor or something in mind who you might want to send it to afterwards. For folks who might benefit from closed captions, wanted to make sure you knew how to do that on Zoom. Zoom has changed their format around a little bit recently, and so if you do need closed captions, you can click More at the bottom of your screen, then click the Captions button, select English, and then select Save, and you should be good to go. Just going to leave this screen up for a couple seconds in case anybody needs those instructions. All right. If we haven't met before, my name is Adrian Keller. I'm the Arizona Program Director for Solar United Neighbors, and I've been with the organization for about 2.5 years now. I personally live in downtown Phoenix, and have for, I want to say, 7 or 8 years now. I've been in Phoenix. I love Phoenix. I love living here. It's a great city to live and an even better place if you're working in the solar industry. As son, I oversee all of our co-op programming throughout the state of Arizona, in addition to our grant work that we do to help lower income folks gain access to solar panels, as well as some of the policy and advocacy work that we're engaged in Arizona and nationally, to broaden the access to solar for all. And I want to take a moment to thank our partners for this co-op. Whenever we launch a co-op, we do so with a few local community partners. They are vital to helping us plan the co-op so that it's a helpful resource to local residents. They help us share the co-op through social media or email list or physical flyers sometimes even still. And they help us run events sometimes as well. And they're just really incredible partners. So thankful to the same six partners that we worked with last year: Raza Development Fund, the Jesuit West Collaborative, Vote Solar, Chispa, Arizona, City of Phoenix, and City of Scottsdale Green Building Program. I want to especially thank Chispa, who's been very helpful in helping us expand our access to Spanish language. This co-op is available to anybody who speaks English and Spanish. We're going to be doing a Spanish Solar 101 a little bit down the road. So Chispa and Raza Development Fund in particular have been really, really instrumental in helping us get the resources and tools we need to be able to do that effectively. If you're unfamiliar with us, Solar United Neighbors, we are a national nonprofit organization with field staff in 12 states, as well as DC and Puerto Rico. We help people go solar, and we represent the interests of solar owners through policy and advocacy work. We ourselves are not a solar installer. In fact, as a 501c3 nonprofit, we're a vendor neutral organization. So we focus on consumer advocacy, solar education, outreach in the community. In brief, our mission is to help people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. And we've been doing this work for a decent amount of time now, since 2007. Pictured here is our founder, Anya Schoolman, and her son, Walter. Walter was at school one day and saw the movie An Inconvenient Truth, which is a movie about climate change that came out in the early 2000s. That movie was really, really affected Walter, and he came home and said, "Mom, we need to go solar to do our part for the environment." Anya said, "Sure, let's look into it," but quickly found out that going solar wasn't such an easy process. They were getting different information from different companies in the area. There were tax credits and financing options and leases to work through, and overall, just not a lot of front-facing consumer education that made solar easy. So as Anya began to untangle this process, she thought we may as well bring along some of our neighbors. Maybe they can help us figure this process together, and maybe we can even get a bulk discount if several of us go solar at the same time. So Walter and his friend Diego, they went door to door in their neighborhood and enlisted the help of about 50 or so neighbors who kind of came together to untangle this complicated solar process together. Through that process, 45 of those homes ended up installing solar panels. And ever since then, Anya's been getting calls from around the country wanted to do similar work. And that's kind of how Solar United Neighbors was born. We've now helped close to 9,000 families install solar panels nationwide. That's about 75 megawatts of installed solar capacity. And we're very close to 1 million tons of CO2 offset, which is very exciting. Arizona is one of our newer states. We've been here since 2019. And since that time, we've been helped more than 500 people go solar. It's about 4 megawatts worth of solar in the state of Arizona. Cumulatively, our members have invested $12 million in their solar panels. And what's really exciting is that they're going to save $22 million cumulatively over the lifespan of those systems. And that's a pretty cool figure to think about. That's $22 million that would have been spent on monthly electricity bills that now is back in people's pockets. All of this solar activity has helped to create more than 90 solar jobs and, of course, offset a significant amount of CO2 in Arizona as well. And this is our 17th solar co-op in the state of Arizona. I believe our seventh, maybe eighth round in the metro area. We've experimented with a few different things, focusing on specific cities or parts of the valley. But the last few years, we've just opened it up to the entire metro area, and that seemed to be really successful. So at Sun, like I said, we help people go solar. That includes through solar co-ops like this one, but also individually, we provide a lot of individual support to folks who need it. We help homeowners, small businesses, nonprofits, houses of worship, governments, a list that seems to only continue to grow. And then we bring people together. That includes this information session that you're watching right now. We do solar tours, happy hours, lobbying days at the Capitol. We provide resources to help solar enthusiasts effectively advocate for their rights. And when we talk about energy rights or solar rights, that covers policies like community solar to make sure that renters have access to the benefits of solar, making sure HOA members aren't restricted from installing solar on their home, fighting for fair solar tax credits, and so many other policies that are happening right here in Arizona, but also nationwide as well. So tonight's presentation is divided into three sections. First, I'll go over some of the basics of solar technology, how it works, and how it's attached to your home. Solar economics is going to cover tax credits and financing information. And then the last shortest section is just going to talk about how our co-op model in particular works. First is solar technology. So how do solar panels work? It's a really good question. So when we're talking about solar tonight, we're talking about photovoltaics or PV cells. So solar panels are made up of semiconductor materials, mostly silicon, but some other elements in there as well. And when photons from sunlight hit those solar panels, it dislodges the electrons in that semiconductor materials, creating a flow of electricity. You may have heard of solar thermal or solar hot water heating, and those technologies still exist today, but right now the vast majority of the market is PV solar, and that's what we'll be focusing on tonight. Solar panels are also called modules. So a panel, a module, same thing. Each module is made up of individual solar cells that, like I said, are mostly made out of silicon. And there's usually about 60 to 70 cells that are sort of sandwiched in between these two glass frames. And panels are fairly large, usually about 6 feet by 3.5 feet is pretty typical for a residential solar panel. And that glass on the panels are very, very strong. I actually got a tour of a solar panel testing facility in Tempe, and you wouldn't believe the different tests that they do to test the endurance of the glass on the solar panels. They can really withstand a lot, and it's a pretty cool technology. And then to talk a little bit about how your system gets attached to the roof, it is going to get attached with a racking system. What you as a consumer need to know is that there's generally a racking solution for most any type of roof. Pictured here is the typical kind of asphalt shingle roof that we see a lot of, where the rails are screwed onto the roof, and then the solar panels are kind of clipped onto those beams. If you've got a flat roof or a metal roof, solar panels can work there as well. If your roof is flat, your installer may ballast the panels down, which essentially just means they're weighing them down. Or depending on the angle, they may use a pitch pocket system to kind of pitch your solar panels upright so that they're at the optimal angle to absorb the most amount of sunlight. A lot of folks in the valley have tile roofs as well. It's very common. Many people call these Spanish tile. Spanish tile just refers to the style of roof. They're often made of clay or concrete. And usually in this case, the installer will remove some of those tiles and then replace it with a mounting foot and a flashing, which is essentially just a sealing technology to make sure that no precipitation can get in there. And then same thing, they'll screw the rails onto those mounting feet and then clip the solar panels onto those beams. And then ground mounted solar can definitely be an option as well, something people have purchased through the it's usually considered by people who don't have a roof that is a good site for solar, and most commonly in rural areas where people have a lot more land on their property. This can work really well. Again, especially if you have a decent amount of space on your property, that's definitely a consideration. So probably not a ton of people in the valley will be getting a ground-mounted system. Also important to keep in mind that they can be more expensive because you've got to build the materials that hook it into the ground. And then depending on how far away it is from your meter, you may have to do some extra trenching or wiring work to hook it up to your system's electricity system. And so there can just be a variety of fixed costs associated with ground mounted solar that are avoided by installing it on your rooftop. So if you have the choice, we definitely always encourage people to do rooftop solar. But if you got a big piece of land, ground mounted might work just great for you. And then you'll need an inverter to take that direct current DC energy from the solar panels, inverting it into AC, alternating current, so that the appliances in your home can use that power. There's essentially two different types of inverters. A string inverter will string all your panels together through one central panel, and then it will be fed through a central box. These work really well for simple installations where maybe there's just one or two identical arrays and not a lot of shade. Microinverters do the same thing, but just on the individual panel level. Microinverters can improve the overall efficiency of a solar system by reducing power losses caused by shading or other factors. They also can offer some greater flexibility and are helpful for more complicated installations. Again, you as a consumer don't need to know tonight, I definitely want this type of inverter or I need this type of inverter. Your installer is going to have a preference based off of the type of installation, and they'll be able to walk you through your options. But if you have any questions or need help with inverters, we would be happy to talk to you about that. And then to connect the solar to your home's electricity system, it's usually a pretty simple connection to your electrical panel. Most homes aren't going to need any sort of panel upgrade in order to handle solar, but some will, especially older homes. It's pretty common where they need to replace that service panel in order to handle the flow of solar. We always ask installers when they bid on our co-op how much a service panel upgrade costs because it's really, really helpful for you as the consumer to know how much that costs going into a project in case it does come up later that you need it. Excuse me. Also, side note, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, there are some tax credits and rebates that are available if you need a service panel upgrade in order to handle solar at your home. And then to clarify some terminology we'll be using tonight, a kilowatt, kW, is a unit of power. So it's used to describe the size of a system in 1,000-watt increments. So 1,000 watts is 1 kilowatt. And so a system made up of 10 350-watt panels, we call that a 4.2 kilowatt size array. Kilowatt hours, on the other hand, are a unit of energy. So that's what you usually see on your utility bill. It's used to describe the amount of electricity that your system is going to produce, also the amount of electricity you purchase from your utility. In Arizona, the average installations are usually between 7 and 8 kilowatts. They've actually gotten a little bit larger as people tend to get larger systems, but about 7 to 8 kilowatts is pretty typical. All right, so putting everything together, you've got your beautiful shiny new solar panels installed on your roof. They are absorbing sunlight, generating a flow of electricity. That's being fed through an inverter, which is inverting that current from DC, direct current, to AC, alternating current. And then the electrical panel, I kind of think of as the brains of the whole operation. So it's directing power where it needs to go, when it needs to go. And then solar owners will have a bidirectional utility meter so that you're able to measure not only how much electricity you're purchasing from the utility, but that the utility can also measure how much excess solar energy that you're not using that's being fed back to the utility that they are then crediting for you. Now, I like to talk a little bit about net metering just because many people have heard of it. It's kind of a confusing policy and it differs a little bit state by state. So, net metering has been a very, very important policy that has really been the driver of rooftop solar in this country for many years. With a net metering system, it's tracking the flow of electricity to and from you, the customer. And whenever you're generating more power than you're using, that extra energy goes back to your bill for credit. Now, historically, you would have received this credit at a 1-to-1 ratio. So whatever you're paying for electricity at that time, if you're generating electricity that you're not using it, it would just be credited at the same rate. Before we have more advanced meters today, but before it used to just be a dial meter on your home. And if you were purchasing electricity from the utility, it would rotate one way. And if you had solar and you started generating too much that was being sent back, it would literally just reverse. And so it was at that 1-to-1 ratio, which made it financially very, very appealing to homeowners. Today, unfortunately, this system is going away. And as I said, it's kind of piecemeal state by state right now. In Arizona, statewide, we do not have net metering. We have a system called export rate credits. So you're still getting credited for any excess production that your solar system, that your home isn't using, but it's just credited now at a fixed rate per kilowatt hour. And that unfortunately is a little bit lower than you would have gotten with net metering. So in Arizona, depending on your utility, for the most part, you're getting a flat rate credit for per kilowatt hour for any excess production you're not using. So we're going to talk about APS and SRP since they're the two major utilities in the Phoenix metro area. So for APS customers, they essentially have two rate plans to choose from. Both are time of use, so the price you pay for electricity differs a little bit depending on the time of day, but also the time of year. That's why you see a range here in the charges for energy. So with either of these plans, you'll see a charge on your bill for on-peak energy, anything that you had to purchase from APS during 4 to 7 p.m. You'll see a separate line item for off-peak energy charges, anything you had to use outside of those hours. And then the plan on the right has a demand charge. And a demand charge is a single flat charge that you get every month based off of the highest single hour of usage during on-peak hours. So APS will look at all your usage between 4 and 7 p.m. for a month. And whatever hour you use the most, they will charge you a single demand charge. And that looks like about $19.59 for most people. That solar export rate credit, that's that 762 a kilowatt hour. That's what APS is paying you for any excess solar your system is producing that you're not using. And then there's a $13 a month service fee. Of course, there's going to be a variety of taxes and other really fun fees that you aren't able to avoid as well. What we found is most people with APS tend to go with this simpler time of use plan on the left. Even though the cost of electricity is higher, you're avoiding that demand charge, which is really difficult for solar to offset. And because peak hours are, for the most part, during the day, hopefully you're using most of your energy that you're producing as opposed to purchasing it from APS anyway. So hopefully those higher electricity prices can be offset by your solar. SRP likes to make things a little more complicated. They've got 4 solar rate plans to choose from, but they're really essentially 2 different types of plans. So the 2 on the left have lower electricity costs, as you can see, 5 to 8 cents a kilowatt hour. And these plans also have a demand charge. So very similar to APS, a single charge per month based on your highest hour of usage. These 2 plans on the left also have net metering. So this is one of the very rare instances in Arizona where you technically can still get net metering. Then the 2 plans on the right, electricity costs a little bit more. The plan on the very right has what's called super off-peak, so just a lot lower price of electricity during night hours when people tend to plug in their electric vehicles. Neither of those plans have a demand charge, but then those 2 plans on the right have an export rate. So SRP is only paying you 2.81 cents a kilowatt hour for any excess solar production that you generate, which is very, very, very low. So typically what we found, again, most SRP customers tend to go for the first plan on the very left, that customer generation plan. Again, even though you have to pay for that demand charge, which is unfortunate, you're getting net metering. And so you'll be credited back for your solar at a little bit of a higher rate, which can be really helpful for reducing the cost of your overall bill. I also wanted to note for SRP, because the way they credit solar customers is not as great as APS, solar installers will design systems a little bit differently for SRP than they would APS. Usually with SRP, they're going to want to design a system that is what we call self-consuming. So they'll design it so you're using as much to, if not all of the electricity you're consuming, as opposed to exporting it back to the grid. With APS, because they're paying you a much better rate for that solar, it's not uncommon for people to oversize their systems a little bit so that they're counting on that credit that they're getting every month for that extra solar. That doesn't work so well with SRP. So typically we see smaller systems, if you can, paired with batteries, works really, really well. But again, your installer as well as Sun, we're going to help you walk through those choices if and when you get to it. All right, so what makes a good site for solar? First and foremost, the orientation of your roof is going to be really important here. Facing south is going to be your best bet because that's where you'll face the most amount of sunlight and be able to generate the most amount of electricity. Solar on the west side of your home can work really well as well too, especially in the context of those peak pricing hours for both APS and SRP. So the cost of our electricity goes up between 4 and 7 p.m. for APS, 2 to 8 p.m. for SRP. And if you have solar on the west side of your home, it's generating more power as the sun is setting right during those peak pricing hours. So that can work really well for folks. Solar on the east side of your home works great too, but we definitely don't recommend putting solar on the north side of your home unless you are in the southern hemisphere. You're also going to want to make sure there's not significant shading, like a really big tree or structure that will be obstructing a lot of the sunlight that will reach your roof. If you do have significant trees, like it's pretty common for people to trim them down when they install solar. But if you've got a really, really big tree that you're super attached to, that may not be an option and you may need to consider some other options. And then finally, you need enough unobstructed space on your roof to handle solar. Like I mentioned, the panels are decently large, 6 feet by 3.5 feet is pretty typical. And so you'll need enough unobstructed space to put them in conjunction with another on your roof. If and when you sign up for the co-op, one of the first things Sun does is a satellite roof review to check the orientation, the spacing, and the shading of your roof. And we'll let you know right off the bat if your roof is a good site for solar or if it's not before you go any further down the process. Now, one question we get asked a lot is what happens when the grid goes down? So if there is a grid outage, power goes out, your solar system is going to shut off automatically. And this is really a safety mechanism built into the inverters of the system because let's say the situation is the power lines are down, APS crews are out there working on those lines to get them back up. They don't want any spare electrons from your solar system flowing through those lines, which could injure those power workers. So it's really a safety thing for their sake. So if you do want power when there is a grid outage, you may want to consider battery storage. Battery storage works great for people who experience frequent utility outages and need a source of backup power. Also, if you want to be able to power critical loads at home, think things like a well pump, medical equipment, refrigerator in Arizona, and air conditioning could certainly be considered a critical load for folks who desperately need that in times of severe heat. For general emergency disaster preparedness as well. Increasingly, people, though, are using their batteries to help reduce their monthly energy bill even more. Pictured here on the screen, this is Amy. She went solar through last year's Phoenix Metro Solar Co-op, and she opted to include a battery with her installation. So she can actually program her battery so that it kicks on right at 4 p.m. and will power her home until 7 p.m. Then, depending on how much charge is left, it'll shut off. She'll continue to buy power from the utility once it's at a cheaper rate. Then in the next morning, her solar system starts recharging her battery, and then she has that available for use. So I want to be clear, batteries are still a very expensive technology. So the primary reason people tend to get batteries is kind of for more of this disaster emergency preparedness to have a little bit of power when the sun goes down. But it's more and more being used as a tool to help decrease people's electricity bills. And again, for folks with SRP, a battery may be even more compelling because you're going to want to avoid exporting any of that solar just since you're getting paid very little for it. If you want to dig in even deeper, we've got a great free guide on our website, solarunitedneighbors.org/storage. You can download a free guide to battery storage. Also, feel free to send me an email. I will send it to you as well if you'd like. So here's another sample case. The Johnsons lose power several times a year, and anytime the power is out, it's usually out for the entire day. So they have a 13.5 kilowatt hour battery bank, which is a pretty typical size for batteries. And they have a 6 kilowatt solar system on their home. So that battery is able to be fully recharged by their solar system in a full day. And if the sun isn't shining, they've got about a day's worth of power thanks to that battery. So that battery will power their refrigerator or microwave, some lights and outlets, a cable modem, a small window air conditioning, but it's not going to have enough juice to power their stove, dryer, electric water heater, or like a whole home HVAC system as well. People can get multiple batteries, and we do see that happen, and you can stack them and have more capacity, which can take on greater and greater loads. But again, most typical case is something like this with one battery bank that provides about a day's worth of power if the grid is down. All right, I'm gonna finish this section up with some frequently asked questions and then get to you all in case you have any live questions. First is warranty. The typical solar installation is going to come with three different types of warranties. So you'll have a power production warranty. That is usually a 25-year warranty that comes from the solar panel manufacturer. And that will guarantee that by year 25, your solar system is still going to be producing a certain level of power that it did at year one. So for example, we often see a 25-year, 90% power production warranty. All that means is that by year 25, the manufacturer guarantees that your solar panels will still be producing at least 90% of the power that they did when they were first installed. Additionally, you'll have a parts warranty that will cover the panels, inverters, and any other physical materials involved with the installation. These can range anywhere from 10 to 25 years, depending on the part. And then the third is a labor warranty that comes from, that covers any roof penetrations or work done by the actual installation crews. So for example, let's say you get solar installed on your roof. A year down the road, you notice your roof is leaking a little bit. Call the solar installer up. They find out that they made an error when they installed your system. They would be on the hook for those repairs because of that labor warranty. Those can range as well, but we usually see 10 to 20 years. At least 10 to years is really best practice for those warranties. Homeowners insurance, if you add solar to your home, it's always a good idea to give your insurance company a call and let them know that you added solar to your home. Most people do not see any sort of increase. If you do, it's definitely worth asking why, and it may be time to start shopping around for a new insurance company. Solar panels actually do provide a level of protection against your roof for rain and other environmental factors. So many insurance companies actually consider them an asset. Now, what about maintenance? The really great thing about solar is that it's very low maintenance. It's not no maintenance, but it's low maintenance. So normal precipitation, normal rain is going to keep them clean. But if there's a very large dust storm or something else like that's covering a lot of the panels, it's probably a good idea to call a solar panel cleaning company to get those dusted and cleaned off so that their production isn't inhibited at all. Every few years, it's a good idea to have a visual inspection done of your solar system, again, just to make sure that everything is working as it should. The great thing is that today, most inverters come with an app that you can pull up your smartphone or tablet and see in real time how much your solar system is producing. If you have that capability, it's a really good idea to check that out every once in a while. They will let you know if a panel is down or something's not working. So it's just good to kind of check up on that every once in a while to make sure that you're not paying more for their utility than you need to. And then how long will your solar systems last? Like I mentioned, solar panels are typically warranted for 25 years, but they'll last longer than that, especially if they're taken care of. I've seen panels on homes that were 35 years, even 40 years once that were still producing power. So they will last beyond 25 years. Their efficiency is just going to decline over time. And then if you live in a homeowners association, an HOA, in Arizona, we actually have a law on the books that says HOAs cannot block you or stop you from adding solar to your roof. Now, they are allowed to put in rules and regulations, like, for example, some kind of design review board. But there's actually been a court case an appeals court case over the years that has said they cannot outright stop you from adding solar. So if you are in an HOV, excuse me, if you're in an HOA and you're having any issues with please feel free to reach out to us. We've got a lot of experience dealing with HOAs. And then if you are in a historic district, I'm always just going to tell you to check out your local historic district guidelines. They vary so much by city to city, and What's pretty common, especially in Phoenix, is they'll have some restrictions. So, for example, you're not allowed to install solar on the roof that's facing the main street, but if they're out of view in the backyard, that might work okay. So they're just going to vary a little bit. And so I'd encourage you to check out your local guidelines to make sure you're not jeopardizing any sort of tax incentives with that historic home. All right, that was our first section. I'm going to take a little pause here and see if we have any questions that need to be answered. And Trinity, I'm not sure why, but I can't really see the chat right now. So if there's any questions, if you could just read them out.
I think I've answered them all in the chat, but if folks have any more that they like Adrian to answer, not via text.
Awesome. Trinity is on it. All right, and we'll have plenty of time for questions towards the end of the presentation as well. So now we're kind of getting into the economics of solar. How do you pay for solar? Great question. So first, I just like to start out by saying that solar is a good investment. It didn't always used to be a great financial investment. Back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, rooftop solar was extremely expensive. Most people weren't doing it for financial reasons. They were doing it for environmental reasons. But today, that's kind of flipped. Like most people get solar because they want to save money in their electric bill. If it helps out the environment, that's even better. But costs have just dropped so significantly since 2010, more than 73%. This is no longer just a specialty or boutique project that only the very, very few can afford. It really does have a good return on investment, and that's even more so when you factor in the state and federal tax credits. This chart kind of helps explain why solar still costs what it does today. So this chart measures the cost of rooftop solar in dollars per watt, which is usually how we measure prices of solar. This yellow bar at the bottom is system components. So the panels, the inverters, anything involved with the physical solar panels. And prices for those have come down a lot just as costs have been reduced in the industry and solar panels have gotten cheaper. That little green bar in the middle is labor costs. So the cost of labor has come down as well for the solar industry, but has remained relatively stable over the years. That really big orange cost, that big orange bar at the top is soft costs. So this is anything other than the physical materials involved with the installation. And a really, really big chunk of this comes down to marketing. Rooftop solar is a really competitive industry, especially in Arizona, and it's not uncommon for installers to pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars per lead that they can then chase to hopefully get a signed contract. It's the reason why you see so many people knocking on your door, so many ads online for solar. It's a really competitive industry, and companies tend to have to spend a lot on marketing. If you contrast this with the solar co-op model, Sun, a nonprofit, we group together 100, 150 households. We educate them about solar, make sure their roof is ready, and then we bid out the group to installers. And so installers are able to offer bulk discounts because we're handing over a list of 100 households who are ready to go for solar. And so they save a significant amount in marketing costs, which helps them, and they're able to pass some of those savings on to you, which is good for you. Full disclosure, Sun does receive $600 from the installer for every signed contract that they receive from the co-op. So essentially, it's a form of a finder's fee, and this helps cover our costs at Sun. And we've actually been told many times that that's a pretty good bargain for the installers, that they often have to pay more than that. So yeah, that kind of explains a little bit about why there's some financial savings with going solar in the co-op. Now, I mentioned the federal solar tax credit. Thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, this tax credit was extended and expanded to the full 30% until 2032. Without the IRA, this tax credit would have expired this year, I believe, or maybe last year. But regardless, it would have dropped to zero. So we're very thankful that this tax credit is back in business. It's important to note that this is a tax credit. So you need to have federal tax liability in order to claim this. So it's not a rebate. You don't get it at point of sale. So if you purchase a solar system this year, that's $20,000 just for round number sake. Next spring, when you file your taxes, you'll be eligible to claim a credit worth $6,000. The state of Arizona also has a 25% state tax credit, but it's capped at $1,000. So most people are just able to claim that $1,000. We've also got a kind of cool law that says if adding solar to your home increases your property tax value, it cannot increase your property tax liability by that much, which is really nice. And then you will not pay any sales taxes if you purchase solar panels in the state of Arizona. Now, at Sun, we're mostly focused on the solar aspects of the Inflation Reduction Act, but there's just a couple other points I wanted to mention that are particularly helpful, especially if you're doing some other home upgrades around the same time that you're considering solar. The Inflation Reduction Act includes a variety of tax credits and rebates that can be used for like a service panel upgrade, like I already mentioned, electric vehicles, electric vehicle charger at home. Maybe you're getting rid of your AC and you're installing a new heat pump. Battery storage is a really big one. That 30% tax credit applies to battery storage. Electric stoves as well. So a lot of electric appliances, energy efficiency, installation, new windows, that sort of thing. So if my advice to you is if you think you might need one of these upgrades soon in the future, definitely reach out to us if you'd like any help exploring these tax credits or rebates. And B, also let your installer know. Let's say you went from a gas stove to electric stove, and at the same time, you're also considering purchasing an electric vehicle. All that new energy consumption is going to increase your demand a little bit. And so your solar installer may want to actually increase the size of your system a tiny bit. Again, if you plan on adding some new electric appliances or vehicles to your home. All right, so now we're kind of getting to the good stuff. What does it all cost? So I can't give you a completely exact answer yet because every single co-op is its unique co-op. They each have a separate bidding round. And so whatever solar installer is selected, they will offer that pricing to the co-op. But for example's sake, we've included here some pricing charts based on $3 a watt. $3 a watt is actually a little bit high. Typically, our co-ops in Arizona are ranging more from 230 to 260 a watt. But again, we wanted to be a little bit conservative since this is just an estimate. We've broken it down by a 4 kilowatt and an 8 kilowatt size system. 8 kilowatts is a pretty typical average size, but some people do go for that smaller system as well. So based on $3 a watt, that would be $12,000 or $24,000 for the cost of those systems. If you're able to get the federal and state tax credit, that does reduce the overall cost pretty substantially. And then we've got a cool modeling software at Sun where we can type in the utility and create some other assumptions based on usage and estimate how much money you'll save on your energy bills because you added solar. And so for year one, for example, for the 8 kilowatt system, you're saving on average, we estimate about $1,600. And by year 25, you're saving a very substantial amount of money, so much so that you're technically profiting at the end of the lifespan of those solar systems. Now for SRP, you'll notice right away that the savings are a little bit less, unfortunately, and that's due in part because of some of the flat fees that solar customers have to pay, in addition to the fact that they just credit you less for any excess solar that you're feeding back to the grid. So all of the pricing in this chart is the same, but the year 1, year 10, and year 25 electricity savings are just a little bit less. And at the end of the lifespan of those systems, that net profit is a little bit less as well. So I want to reiterate, if you're an SRP customer and you're listening to this, like solar still makes sense. It's still a good investment. But the specificities of that solar system are going to be really important. Like I mentioned earlier, installers tend to do smaller system sizes on SRP households. And so the savings is just going to look a little bit different and be a little bit less, unfortunately, than APS. But we have many, many SRP customers go solar every year, and they do save money, and it's a good deal for them. And side note, if that's frustrating to you, that's kind of why the fight for your energy rights parts exist in our mission. So Sun, we are constantly at the Corporation Commission, at SRP meetings, fighting to change this. It's ridiculous that two people who live across the street from each other with the same solar system are getting such drastically different savings metrics just because they have a different utility. It's the same sun. We should all be able to benefit from it. And so we do a lot of policy and advocacy work to try to affect change on these things as well. All right, how to pay for your system. Of course, if you're paying cash, that's going to be the highest upfront cost, but will also maximize your savings in the long run. I will talk about loans on the next slide, but third-party ownership in Arizona, that usually refers to PPAs or power purchase agreements. This is where a third party, sometimes the installer, sometimes the financer, will actually own the solar system on your roof, and then you're leasing those panels. And so you're still getting the benefits of that electricity, but you have to pay a flat lease amount per month to whoever owns those panels. Typically at Sun, we encourage people, if they can't afford a system up front, to look into financing in order to own that system. Your financial savings are going to be much greater over the lifespan if you own the system, as opposed to if you are leasing it. Leasing can also be really challenging if you move before your lease ends, and there can be some other tricky things as well. I will note that for people who are not eligible to claim the federal solar tax credit, let's say an elderly couple or somebody who's very low income and doesn't make enough money to pay federal taxes, a lease can actually work somewhat well in those situations because the third party, say the installer, they're able to claim the 30% tax credit on that lease system. And so because they're getting that tax credit, they can pass some of those savings on to you in the form of a better lease agreement. But the devil is always in the details. If you're considering a lease, that will be an option through this co-op, but I just encourage you to read it very closely, have someone else, ideally Sun, double check it for you, because we've seen some lease agreements that are great and super helpful. We've seen some that are terrible and can be really burdensome. And then one grant I like to mention is the Rural Energy for America program, aka REAP. This is a grant that pays for solar for rural small businesses or farmers. So again, probably not a ton of those in the Phoenix metro area, but this grant actually does include urban farmers, of which there are several in Phoenix. And so if you know of somebody like that, they may be able to qualify for a REAP grant to help pay for their system. So the important thing to know with loans is that you have options, and we're always going to encourage you to shop around. Most installers do offer in-house financing. I think every installer who's ever won a co-op has offered some form of in-house financing, and that can be really helpful because it kind of keeps everything, you're sort of working with one company throughout, and it can be simple, and sometimes they can be really great terms. Typically, what this will look like is an installer has a preferred financing company. So you're able to sign everything through your salesperson with your installation company, but you're just making loan payments to a third-party financing company. You certainly do not have to finance through your installer, though. Again, we encourage you to shop around. Many credit unions and banks do offer solar loans, not as many as I wish, but Marisol Federal Credit Union in Phoenix is a big one that offers a lot of solar loans. Folks can also get access to loans through the Tucson Old Pueblo Credit Union down in Tucson. They do loans, solar loans in the Phoenix area as well. It used to be pretty common for people to maybe refinance their home or take out a home equity line of credit in order to pay for solar. Probably wouldn't recommend that right now just because interest rates are so high, but that has been a common option historically. And then co-op members will have access to the Clean Energy Credit Union as well as the Community First Credit Union. These are national credit unions that offer solar loans, usually at a really good rate. And so if you join the co-op and you're looking for a financing option, we'd encourage you to consider some of these options. All right, that was our section on solar economics. Trinity, any questions I should answer?
We had a question about solar not seeming like it has reduced costs much from a firsthand experience in 2015, but I was going to pull out an inflation calendar calculator to see if that makes a difference.
Sure, yeah. 2015 is definitely, I feel like, kind of one of the tipping points with solar. Like prices are definitely falling, but probably much higher than they would be if you went solar today. The other thing that's really interesting is the rate plans. I'm assuming this is in Arizona, are going to be a lot different. So in 2015, we still had net metering for most customers in Arizona, and that helped you get a much better rate of return on your solar system. But then, of course, the cost was a little bit higher as well. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag there, depending on affordability. But I will say, definitely noticed costs come down a bit since 2015. All right, I'm going to carry on here with our last section and also our shortest section on solar co-ops. And then at the very end, like I said, we'll open it up to more questions. Great. So Solar United Neighbors, we've run over 400 now, which is kind of crazy to think about, 400 different solar co-ops across the US. And as such, it's become a pretty well-oiled machine that we consistently see positive results from. Some of the benefits of going solar through a co-op is first and foremost, we're going to aggregate lots of consumers together. So everybody goes solar around the same time through one competitively selected installer. This helps you save money on your installation since the group is getting a bulk deal. Now, as we're a nonprofit, we're also going to help support you through the process as an unbiased vendor neutral organization. I understand that going solar can be a complicated and intimidating process. And one of my favorite parts about my job is helping people and teaching people who are brand new to solar so that they feel less overwhelmed and more confident in their decision to move forward. We will provide free expert technical advice on all things solar. We'll help you make an informed decision that you feel really good about. And we'll also help connect you to a movement of solar lovers in your neighborhood and your state that can have a greater impact on solar nationwide. I just want to note one of the things that people say they love most about our co-ops is just having a second pair of eyes to look at things. Oftentimes, people will be presented with a contract to sign, and it might look great, but people don't really know what they're looking at. We've reviewed hundreds, probably safe to say tens of thousands of solar contracts, and so we kind of know what to watch out for. If you go solar through the co-op or not, if you ever have any questions about the best way to go solar, is this a good deal or not? Is this a good installer or not? As a nonprofit, we're really in a unique position to be able to answer some of those questions with confidence. And we have your best interest in heart as opposed to just trying to make another sale. So the entire solar co-op process is usually about 6 to 8 months, depending on how long installation takes. So we launched this co-op a couple weeks ago, and you are all now in step one. You are at this information session, learning a little bit, hopefully something about solar. Once this wraps up, I hope that you will sign up for the Phoenix Metro Solar Co-op. It is open now, it is free to join, and it is not a commitment to go solar, so you can back out at any time if it's not the right fit for you. If you do join the co-op, though, I hope that you'll share the opportunity with your friends, your neighbors, your coworkers, anybody who doesn't like paying their electric bill. We have a goal of 150 for this particular co-op, and that's really doable, but only with your help. Step 4 is all about installer selection. So we think it's really important that you, as the co-op members who will be working with and purchasing systems from the installer, are the ones to pick which installer to work with, not us. So once we've received critical mass around 30 members, which we're getting pretty close to, Sun will issue a request for proposals, an RFP, to solar installers who serve the Phoenix area. Solar United Neighbors, we're going to receive those bids and check their references, their reviews, make sure their insurance and contractor's license are up to date. We do a really thorough review process to make sure that we're presenting high quality bids to you. Then members of the co-op who volunteer will form what we call the installer selection committee. They'll meet together on one evening and review all of the bids together. We'll be there to help answer any questions and provide guidance and tips, but at the end of the day, it is up to the members of the selection committee to select one installer on behalf of the group. Now, there will be a deadline for this co-op, so it's only open, I believe, until the end of July. And so only members who have joined the co-op between the launch date and the close date have access to the negotiated co-op pricing. Once an installer is selected, they're going to start reaching out to each member of the co-op to propose a custom solar proposal for your home, but based off of that negotiated co-op pricing. So typically, like I said, we usually price things in watts. So installers will be bidding a discounted price per watt. Then when it comes time to you to meet with that installer, you get to decide with their help what size of solar system you would like. So each system will look a little bit differently and will be catered to you, but based off of the negotiated pricing that the co-op was able to receive. At this point, if everything looks good to you, you feel confident about it, you've got financing lined up, we hope that you'll go ahead and sign a contract with the selected installer. But again, if you don't, that's okay. There's no penalties, no hard feelings. The installation process itself can be pretty quick. Usually solar systems are installed like on the roof, usually in about a day, maybe a day and a half. But as soon as you sign a contract, it can take several weeks to get to that point. So your solar installer will need to design your system. They're going to have to get permits from your system, from your city or county, depending on where you live. They also have to get sign off from your utility. And so the actual day of installation was very short, but it can take a few weeks to lead up to that. And then once those panels are installed on your roof, the installer needs to get what's called PTO, or permission to operate, from your utility. That basically just says APS or SRP has looked at it, it looks good, we're going to interconnect it to our system, at which point it will be turned on and you'll be able to start generating your own electricity right at home. Eighth step of the co-op is to celebrate. So once the majority of the systems are completed, I'd love to come. I would love to come. I live in Phoenix. I've been going down to Tucson so often. Once the majority of the systems are completed, I'd love to get together and celebrate the successes of the co-op. Just like to finish up here with a couple quotes from co-op members who went solar last year or the year before. Deanne and Rob said that going through the co-op was a relief because we aren't experts. It would have taken us a very long time to figure everything out. The co-op really was the way to go. It just makes sense. More people, more buying power. Marjorie and Michael said that the co-op was very helpful. Sun did the hard work. They got all of the bids, and we really felt like we had a support system. The process was great, and I was just thrilled that you all are doing this and that we found you, because it really is a lot of work to do yourself. And then finally, Gwen and Malcolm down in Tucson said it's hard to weed through all the disinformation. Having support from the co-op made the world of difference. It gave us peace of mind and made us comfortable with moving forward. And that is what we are aiming for. All right, so if you're interested, the co-op is open now. You can go to solarunitedneighbors.org/Phoenix Metro, and it will take you to the link to sign up for the co-op. Like I mentioned, this co-op is also open in Spanish. I'm hoping, if they haven't already done so, Trinity will put the link to the Spanish page, if in case you have a Spanish neighbor or coworker who might prefer to read the webpage in Spanish. And then if you do sign up for the co-op, I really hope that you'll tell a couple friends or neighbors about it so that we can grow the group and have an even bigger impact. That is all I had for my presentation. If you had any questions that you'd feel more comfortable emailing us about, please feel free to reach us at azteam@solarunitedneighbors.org. Otherwise, Trinity and I are going to stick around for a couple more minutes to answer any questions that you may have. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you have a fantastic rest of your nights, and I hope that you go solar. Thanks so much.